Alright, so I'm going to give you a quick tutorial on how to operate the F-15 as it stands right now. It is fully loaded with a fuel tank in the center. Both engines are running. That works fine by me. But let's go ahead and talk about the various instruments before I get going. So down here is where you have your backup indicators. You have your attitude indicator right here. Below that's your heading indicator. To the left of that is your speed. Below that is your angle of attack indicator. And below that is an accelerometer. To the left of that is going to be your weapon systems. They'll tell you what you have selected. Above that is your radar. This is your radar warning system. It'll tell you the various different radar signatures that you have to worry about. Here are your engine instruments. To the left of that is your altimeter and your vertical speed indicator, along with a fuel indicator and all that fun stuff. On the HUD, you have various different types of symbology. But starting from the left, you have your airspeed indicator. And in the center, you'll notice several bars. Some of them are dotted, others are not. That is your attitude indicator. Above that is your heading strip. It'll tell you where you're going. Pretty much the same as this, just in, digital form. That aircraft in the center is the direction that your plane is headed. I know that I'm not moving, but when you're in flight, you'll see that. Then, to the right, you have your altimeter. Simple as that. There's some other symbology, but I'll get to that. But first thing that we need to do, get our flaps down. Simple as that. And now, for several of the camera controls, let's talk about the functions. Function keys. F1 is going to be the cockpit. F2 is outside. F6 is for any missiles in case someone fired a missile. It looks like someone has. I was going to shoot down those that flanker, but it seems like someone is already going to be doing that. And then F10 is for your map. The white dot represents where I am, where my plane is, so I just need to taxi to this runway and then take off. Then see what type of threats there are going to be. But either way, let's get this ball rolling. Alright. So the way that you taxi is that you ease the throttle a little bit, then pull it back. And yeah, if you didn't hear that, basically what I did is that I increased the throttle slightly, and when I started moving, I pulled it back. Simple as that. If you want to get rid of that stuff on the left, just hit the tab key. And then start heading towards the runway. Just a quick warning. When it comes to taking off, it is going to be a little bit tricky trying to steer straight. I've had that problem before. Actually, numerous times. This right here, this yellow line with the bars, is the runway hold short line. Look both directions because you never know in multiplayer. Some people can be stupid. And I might screw this up as well, because the takeoff is not the easiest. But with that said, you only want to make the slowest, and I mean the absolute slowest and most shallow corrections when it comes to taking off. And it doesn't matter if this guy says you're unable to clear for takeoff. That's just some air traffic controller stuff nobody pays attention to. So what you'll do is that you'll slowly increase the throttle, get it steady, and then go full afterburner. And let's hope I don't screw it up. See, a little bit difficult, but you want to get up to about 200 knots. Rotate, gear up, and then after you get sufficient amount of speed, pull your flaps up as well. So here I am, took off. Let's go ahead and head towards these bandits. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were shot down by now. Which is fine. If that were the case, I will just wait for them to respawn or find something else. Yeah, as you can guess, once you figure out how to deal with the plane, then it'll be a lot easier to fly. A little while after takeoff, you can pull the throttle back. I usually go a little bit under 90% N1 or 90% RPM. N1 is what they call it. Because I don't know if it's a turbofan or a turbojet, but it doesn't matter. I think it's just a jet. Yeah, this is how you take off an F-15. This is how you get it airborne. And it doesn't look like there are any airborne threats. Which is fine. If it don't spawn again, I'll just show you in a different server. Yeah, so now that it comes down to, you know, being in the air, how exactly do you fly the plane? Well, the best thing to do is to generally keep it straight and level. You want the plane to have its wings level, the tiny simple plane on the HUD to have its wings level to the horizon on the attitude indicator. Adjust for trim if need be. And there you go, it is flying. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it's more fuel efficient that way. As for turning, what you will want to do is that you want to be mindful of airspeed. Notice that when I am pulling this plane, I'm actually losing speed. And that's because I'm increasing the drag. Now, what you could do is hit the afterburner, and this is probably what you're going to do in a dogfight, so if you need to maneuver, then I at least suggest that you start maneuvering past 450, even past 500 knots for the most maneuverability you can get. So let's go ahead and do a turn. I'm going to turn 360 or maybe 380 degrees to 140. But what you would do is that you will want to make sure that you aren't losing airspeed when you're in this turn. If you need to turn tighter, you can, but you will lose airspeed in the process. So keep that in mind. If you pull it back all the way, then what's going to happen is that you're going to overstress and you're going to stall.
Eject. Hydraulics failure.
All right, I'll eject.
Eject. Hydraulics failure.
But yeah, that's why you don't want to That is why you don't want to mess with the stick, why you don't want to pull it too hard. It will break your plane. And different planes have different fault tolerances and whatnot. But while we're here back on the ground, might be good to show you how to load the plane and how to get it started up. So the way that you load a plane, in most multiplayer sessions, the plane is completely barren. But what you can do is click, well, not click, but push left alt and then comma, not comma, but left alt apostrophe, and that will bring up the mission resources page. And this can give you several different types of weapons. And this is going to be, you have a lot of weapons that you can use. For example, you have the AIM-120 and the AIM-7. So the AIM-120, also known as the AMRAAM, is going to be an active radar missile. What that means is that once this missile fires, and to get a little bit technical, once it actually gets its systems booted up and pit bulls, which I'll get into later, this will end up following the plane on its own. The AIM-7, however, requires you to keep a lock on the entire time you are pursuing an enemy, because that missile will not track on its own. It needs the radar from its host. So I almost always just go with AIM-120s. Longer range, and it is an active radar missile. However, the AIM-7 does have one advantage over the AMRAAM in the fact that since it tends to be fired at close range, it tends to have better hit ratios than the AMRAAM. But the AMRAAM still has pretty decent hit ratios. And now we have the AIM-9s. So I would go with the AIM-9M. These are the Sidewinders. They're short-range, heat-seeking missiles. Odds are the fight is going to be over before you get into a dogfight, but if you do end up in a dogfight, these things are an absolute lifesaver. They are short-range, but they are highly maneuverable, and it's pretty hard to break a lock of a Sidewinder, especially with how close of a range it is.
Request rearming.
Yeah, you can check. Hit F2 to see the outside of your aircraft, and you can see the plane get loaded. And apparently that's an Alaska regiment. I had no idea. Not regiment. Is it a squadron? Yeah, I think it's a squadron. Yeah, don't rely on me to have the best terminology. If there is one weakness that I have, it's definitely that. But dude, that whole thing is kind of weird. Like, it removes the support pylons.
Rearming complete.
To get the Sidewinders on. Alright, so Control C to close the canopy. It's a lot quieter that way. Right Shift L to get the systems going. Alt L for the left engine. It'll take a while to spool up. But not too long. You can also see that the fuel flow has been introduced, so the engine is running. Now let's hit Control Home, right Control Home for the right engine. You want to do this one at a time. Some Flaming Cliffs aircraft will allow you to start both engines at once. However, you don't want to do that in real life. So I always just do it one by one. Plus, with a more complex aircraft, you can't do both. Cool, now let's extend our flaps. And here we go. Doesn't take much, but the F-15 is set for takeoff. So let's go ahead and take off again.
Code 1-1. Clear to taxi to runway 6. Path 1.
Do have to admit, though, it's a little bit creepy to have an air base with just one fighter jet. By the way, I do believe... Yeah, this is Guam, right? Very much Guam. And to the north of us is Saipan. Yeah, I'm just taking a look at the communications before I no available targets, and it doesn't look like it can generate any. Doesn't seem like they have it, but it doesn't matter too much. What I'm going to do is do a rolling takeoff.
Code 1-1. Unable to clear for takeoff.
Again, ignore that. Everyone does.
Code 1-1. Unable to clear for takeoff.
Still need to practice more. But we'll get the gear up, and then we'll get the flaps up. Well, it doesn't look like there's any targets. I think that'll be fine. Instead, what I'm going to do is show you how to land. But before we do that, let's go ahead and talk about energy conservation. So, when it comes to energy conservation, the more speed and more altitude that you have, the better. So let's go ahead and climb. I have an afterburner going. It's not going to take very long for this thing to start climbing. In fact, we could climb even higher without losing airspeed. But yeah, now we're losing airspeed. So anytime you climb, you're going to be fighting against gravity. Usually, your aircraft will be able to do that without a problem. If you start losing airspeed too much, you can lower the nose, and you'll notice it's starting to slow down a lot more slowly. If you lower the nose enough, it'll start to gain in airspeed as such. So just always be mindful of gravity. And on another note, I'm going to show you a stall. So a stall happens, not to make it too complex, but a stall happens basically when you exceed the angle of attack, which is basically the wind direction relative to the wing. So, as you can guess, notice my wings. The W in there is supposed to tell you where my wings are, where my aircraft is relative to the horizon, and the difference between that and the miniature plane is the angle of attack. So let me go ahead and pull my throttle all the way back. So I'm currently at idle, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to keep this small plane as level with the horizon as I possibly can. But I also want you to take notice of the W as well. Notice that the distance between the W and the artificial plane is getting wider and wider. Which means that I'm actually having to compensate by lifting my nose. Notice how the nose is up, and notice how the plane is flying straight. For the most part, it looks like I was climbing a little bit, but the distance does keep growing, more and more and more. Eventually it's going to reach a point where it's going to get critical. So our angle of attack is greater than 5 degrees. It actually says more than 10 degrees, which I'll believe it because it's getting more and more distant. And as the plane gets slower, this angle of attack is going to increase to the point where it's going to lead to a stall. It's just that it's kind of hard to stall this plane because the F-15 has a lot of energy. And as you can see now, we're actually getting pretty high in terms of angle of attack. And now the aircraft is starting to shake. We are getting very close to a stall. Now the way that you deal with the stall is that you push the nose down and increase the throttle. Now, here's the other thing. A stall doesn't have to come from slow speed. In fact, I'll show you. So while we get to, let's say, 350 knots, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to slowly turn this thing. So as you increase, even though that I'm going 350 knots, as I increase, eventually the angle of attack is going to lead me into a stall. And now we're at a stall. This was with full afterburner, and it still caused me to stall. So always keep that in mind. That said, I need to find Guam so I can land back at my airbase. Cool. But yeah, you always want to make these slow connections or these slow corrections when it comes to fighting. It's not just, you know, jam the stick and do whatever you need to get the edge on the enemy. There is a bit of finesse to it. that you have to take into consideration. Also, you may not note this, but B is for braking. It'll help slow the plane down. Getting into clouds, you should always be concerned about mountainous terrain. We are over the Pacific, so that's not going to be an issue. Plus, we have our instruments to tell us if we're way too close. You can always F10 your map. So, obviously when you're landing, you want to be slower, but not as slow as you think. You actually want to land at a nice 200 knots. Alright, so we're going to land at the international airport. That's just a little bit closer. Gonna zoom in. So yeah, you want to lower the flaps and lower the gears. The plane is actually pretty smart. It'll let you know if... It won't deploy the flaps if you are going too fast. But once you slow down, which landing gear will definitely help with, then you're definitely in the good. So you want to keep your speed at around 200 knots when coming into landing. You also want to make sure that your miniature plane is focused towards the end of the runway. Now, when it comes to landing, you want to make sure that your hand is on both throttle and stick, because it is a little weird how you land. The way that you land in most aircraft is that you use the throttle to increase or decrease your altitude or your rate of descent, while your pitch controls your airspeed. Obviously, they'll still. Obviously, the pitch will still affect the. It'll still affect, the rate of descent, and your throttle will still affect the speed. But it's better to think of it as that. Like if you're going too fast, you may want to decrease the throttle, but you might also want to pitch the nose up so you don't descend too much. You'll also see these lights towards the left of the runway. Those are called PAPI lights. Not every airport has them, but what you want to have is 2 red and 2 white, so that you end up in a proper glide slope. As such. So yeah, keep your aircraft. So yeah, just keep it there, just a little bit behind the threshold. Increase the airspeed if you need be, or decrease it depending. And now for the fun part, because I haven't landed this in a while, so I might screw up. But yeah, once you're over the runway threshold, you will want to decrease the throttle and land as such. You still have to freaking correct with the rudder pedals, though, and that does suck. Okay.
Pontiac 6-1. You are cleared for takeoff and ready. Climb 300 at QFE 743.79.
Okay. So we did land. We landed safely.
Taxi to parking area.
After you land, bring your flaps up. And there you go. That's basically how you fly the F-15. Pretty basic. Alright, so here's going to be an example of an F-15 in action. This is just going to be a basic air-to-air, but it'll show you the capabilities of the F-15, which I know you're eager to see. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and do this.
Israeli airspace. Watch out for follow-on fighters.
Alright, so a few things I haven't really talked about.
190 for 160 at 16,000.
190.
Uzi 5-1. Focus 1-1. Pop-up group 048470 at 4,000 knots.
Alright, so, a few things about the radar. There are different types of... What the hell?
1-1. Bra 066460 at 25,000 knots.
Alright, so a few things about...
Uzi 5-1. Focus 1-1. Bra 066450 at 25,000 knots. Uzi 5-1. Focus 1-1. Bra 067450 at 29,000 knots. Uzi 5-1. Focus 1-1. Bra 067450 at 25,000 knots. Down. Hard spike. Close spot.
Alright, so now we have a target. I will have to tell you the difference between RWS and TWS. But in TWS, you can actually lock on more than one target. As such. So I have my AMRAMs armed. I'm going to check it out. Also, there are some lines on the right bar. The top line is going to show you the in range. However, you do want to get closer than just that. Now it's kind of hard to see, so I'll lift the nose up a little bit. So as it gets closer to this line, you'll actually start to see the circle increase. Now this circle is going to show you the ideal place to where to fire your AMRAM. But we're not exactly in range just yet, so what we're going to do is that we're just going to keep going in. The closer the missile is, the less likely the enemy will have to actually defend. Alright, I just fired 2 missiles at 2 different planes. So this guy looks pretty screwed. Splash. And just in case, nope, he was splashed too. So yeah, the F-15 is a very deadly airplane. I was just able to take out 2 aircraft without a problem. Oh, that's just his parachute. I was like, wait, was that a plane? No.
Uzi 5-1, focus 1-1, pop-up group 360-415 at 4,000, cold.
360 for 15 at 4,000. So what that means is that they're 360 degrees towards me, 15 miles out. Cold means they are flying away from me. 4,000 feet is their altitude. So I'll have to scroll down, take a look, and see if we can find anything. The closer we get to an enemy without spotting them, the more dangerous it becomes. So you got to keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and drop our fuel tanks. 316. Alright, there they are. Let's go ahead and mark them. Fox 3. Fox 3 again. Now I'm going to have my AMRAAMs focus on them. Either of them hits, so that means that I am in a dogfight. Fox 2. Fox 2. And let's finish him off with guns if I have to. Don't need to. All right. And that's how you blow up planes with the F-15. So yeah, needless to say, the F-15 is incredibly deadly when it comes to its capabilities. It's not something you want to joke at. If you have to fight an F-15, it's definitely an adversary that you can take seriously. The only other thing is a jammer. So if you want to get ECM going, you just hit the E key, and you'll see on your radar warnings receiver, it'll start to flash. That means that the jammer is warming up. And once it gets to a solid, that means it will have successfully warmed up. Now just be aware that a jammer is not 100%. Eventually an enemy radar is going to burn through it and it's no longer going to work. But in the meantime, they have to be much closer and they have to be focused on you for a lot longer time than what you normally have if you didn't have the jammer. Plus, sometimes switching the jammers on and off can break an enemy lock, so just keep that in mind when you are flying. The one disadvantage of a jammer, however, is that it is amplifying your radar signature to blind someone. So think of someone pointing a flashlight at you in the middle of the night. You're not going to figure out how far that person is, you can't see that much, but what you do know is that that light is there. And missiles can go towards a jamming target. It just doesn't know what the distance away from the jamming target is. It'll have to burn through it a little bit longer. So, just something to keep in mind, and hope this made a lot more sense.